Define who you are. Work out who you are. How can I know you if you don't know who you are yourself? So define your core values so that can resonate with your employees, so they can become your first line of word-of-mouth advertising, and then engage with your customers on the basis of those core values. The power of social media is not to attract people to you, but to put people to work for your brand. If people like you and care about you and see that you are the celebrant of your community rather than its celebrity, they will go to work for you. They will tweet about you. They will share your product and services. And that is word-of-mouth advertising in the traditional sense that you would kill for. So I think with all those various hats on, there are many opportunities for each of us in our daily lives to make a contribution.
So if we can send a wake-up call to a brand, let's go back and step back and be on the brand side. Mm-hmm. If you get a wake-up call, let's say,
you just delete the post and wipe it off Twitter,
yeah, exactly.
and that always works. It's always really good.
Exactly. I mean, beyond calling PR and legal, what should the folks in the C-suite be thinking about?
You schedule a meeting which takes 5 days to organize a meeting for the 5 people that need to be there to make the decision about what happened 5 days ago.
Right.
No. One of the challenges in hierarchical organizations obviously is the chain of command. And I've actually worked with companies who are like, sent back flowcharts and there's 5 stages of approval before you can send out a tweet. Isn't that wonderful?
Oh yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, and you back up and go, you do know that this is a real-time thing, right?
Yeah.
What should you do? If you do get a wake-up call, you should look at it as a gift. You should go, fantastic, the squeaky wheel is pointing out where we're failing. In which case, you reach out to that person immediately and you say, firstly, we acknowledge that you're unhappy. How can we help? Secondly, you try to take it offline and deal with them in a way that, they will be your greatest advocate on the other side of it. By the same token, you get some people who just like to throw punches out there that are just nasty people that just want to, say terrible things about your brand online, in which case you send them a warning saying, we understand that you're upset, but we'd prefer to keep the dialogue, a healthy dialogue going with appropriate language. So we'd invite you to talk to us directly or to, talk about it in different terms. After a warning like that, you can approach them directly or, remove them from the account if it's being offensive to other people. But more than anything, you need to treat... The biggest crime a brand can take right now is not seeing someone. If you don't see someone, they're mad. And if someone cares enough, even in a negative sense, to put their hand up and complain, see them, acknowledge them. And if you treat it appropriately, they'll become your biggest brand advocate. If you try and wipe them away or delete them, you'll just inflame them. And instead, you should have a protocol in place that can happen in real time. Like, do you remember when was it the whale at SeaWorld pulled the trainer in and drowned her?
Yeah.
And it wasn't handled well for a couple of days, and the whale was still tweeting out 2 days later? You need to have a damage control protocol in place where you're like, great, this is what happens, here's who's responsible, here's our response in line with our core values, here's what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
I think a lot of companies have that in terms of crisis communications plans, but I just wonder if that ever really gets to the people who can make a big difference in maybe changing institutional inertia, getting a whole different mentality about, whether it's complaints or dealing with, consumers, doing better in the marketplace, for trying to be a more responsible corporate citizen.
It's really hard. Here's the 2 bookends of the problem as I experience them. One is you either need a visionary leader. You need an Indra Nooyi or a Richard Branson or Blake Mikowski or Scott Harrison or whoever it might be that is an extension of their own core values, their self-definition as a person. They are defining the future of that company in a way that resonates in the social business marketplace. If you don't have that, middle management or below find it incredibly frustrating because all they do is get pressure downward to hit their numbers. And when they try and apply pressure upwards to change the culture, they hit a glass ceiling of sorts. So that's a real problem, in which case the best thing you can do is fortify your approach in the sense that you put together a very compelling business plan. You get the reports together, you get the research together, you look at what competitors are doing, you get the latest research and what the return on investment is, and you make a compelling business case for this sort of engagement. And it's not like you're really taking a risk these days. Look at all the examples, some of which I mentioned earlier on today. The biggest brands in the world are doing this. Expedition 206 by Coke, or harmony between man, nature, and machine with Prius, or Pepsi Refresh. I mean, these are the biggest brands. Ford, GM, Starbucks, Nike. I mean, what more does it take for our industry to overcome that institutional inertia and also that personal inertia to change? It's uncomfortable. But I believe that this change right now, this shift to the social business marketplace, is as profound as the arrival of the internet in 93, 94 in terms of the business market. We will not be able to remember in 2 or 3 years' time a marketplace in which consumers didn't have multiple channels to respond. Imagine, we're going to sit here going, our kids will say to us, you mean you just took what you were told of television, radio, and print, and you couldn't talk about them or talk back to them or tell your friends about them? You'd be like, yeah. They're like, that's crazy.
Well, and you had to send a letter by snail mail.
You had to send a letter by snail mail. You know, there was a photograph at a conference the other day where I was speaking. A gentleman got up there and he showed a photograph of their 4-year-old child in their diaper, standing up against the television with their finger against the screen, wondering why they couldn't change the channel with their finger. We are now in the post-mouse generation. Research shows in China that when you actually ask a young person in China, do they use the internet? They say no. But you say to them, do you use Facebook? And they say yes. Because the internet is their electricity. It's invisible to them. It's like the air they breathe. That is our marketplace. That is our audience. So as much as we would like to defend our own relevance and as an extension of that, secure our clients and redefine our market share and so on, the marketplace has moved on. And if you look around and look at the publishing industry, the music industry, the newspaper industry, what more evidence do we need? On one hand, we've seen the creative destruction, as Joseph Schumpeter calls it, of all these monopolies, a massive scale, the video industry, home movie industry. And on the other hand, we've got this example of all the leading brands out there engaging socially in different ways and having a high tolerance for risk and failure. I don't really think there's an excuse for us now not to get engaged on a substantive level, because the evidence is all there. And if you look at the consumer marketplace, look what they're doing with Facebook and Twitter and all the other tools out there. So I think, you know, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of how late you're going to be if you're not deeply engaged already.
So tell us, who should read We First?
Who should read We First? We First was written for a number of different audiences because why? Social media applies to a number of different areas. Firstly, CEOs that want to make sense of how they build communities and drive profits. I took a very hard look at the latest in mobile, social, and gaming technology, and then as a former Nike creative, applied that sort of creativity thinking, what will branding look like in the future? What are strategies you can use, and what are the steps to get there? Secondly, if you're a CMO or a digital or a social officer, it breaks out all those specifics of what stage is your brand at, and where can it go, and what's the larger marketplace context, and what's the context of globalization and the whole discussion around capitalism. Because we are in a changing world dynamic right now, where the place of the US is changing, the strength of the US dollar is changing, what's happening with China and India. Emerging markets are growing at 17%, we're growing at 2 to 3%. What does that mean for our business? Thirdly, it is a great book for non-profit leaders. Non-profits do amazing work, but they could also be more effective storytellers. Melinda Gates at TED Exchange last year said, non-profits need to be less like missionaries and more like marketers. You have to sell your story. So the book is a very effective tool to explain how the more traditional world of storytelling through marketing and branding comes to life through social technology. Then fourthly, it talks to social entrepreneurs. If you're a young business and you think, my gosh, does this technology level the playing field? Great, then what do I do? Because I've got the same tools as the big brands. How do I build community harder and faster than they do? Because I don't have their inertia of 400 people and 400 health plans and lights to keep on. And then finally, The fifth audience is the socially responsible consumer. Whether you're a busy mum or whether you're a dad who's got to make a decision about a big ticket item like a washing machine or a car, you can use Good Guide in the shopping aisle as a mum, and I don't mean to stereotype, but just for simplicity's sake, or for a dad, if you're going to go and buy a car, you can go and look on brandkarma.com and look at the rating of that company online on a platform. You just enter the brand, GM, Ford, Apple, and you see their carbon footprint, their corporate social responsibility initiatives, how they treat their employees, so that when you spend that $5,000 plus, you get the halo effect yourself of going, you know what, I made a mindful decision. So all those 5 audiences can benefit from We First. And the whole purpose of this book, We First is not an idea I can own. We First exists in the collective. It is a celebration of every individual, non-profit, social entrepreneur, brand or advertising agency that's doing meaningful work out there. We now live in an intimately connected global community. We now need to reframe business in those terms. We now need to reach out to consumers in those terms. And that is how we're going to make money in the future. So the book is absolutely designed for all those 5 audiences.